-1 in some places. Further south, a milder picture, but a little bit windier too, with winds coming up from the southwest. Monday starts a wet picture for many, with hail snow across parts of Wales into the south of the Pennines as well, but that will eventually clear its way south and eastwards as we go through the day on Monday. Further north, across Scotland, northern England, a drier picture, plenty of sunshine around, but that rain and cloud slowly clearing its way south and eastwards through Monday, leaving a drier and brighter but colder day for many on Tuesday and Wednesday.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Who is it?
We're here for the show.
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Saturday night and this is the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes along with Elliot Keck, Chloe Dobbs, Benjamin Butterworth and Emma Webb. Tonight on the show, King Charles is making a big mistake by making himself the poster boy of net zero.
UK taxpayers have given global quangos £85 billion. Are they getting their money's worth?
It's time to scrap the NHS model. Even Labour are finally realising it.
Harry and Meghan need to stop talking double Dutch and name the royal racists themselves.
The London borough's flip-flopping over Hanukkah shows how morally perverse we've become.
It's 7 p.m. and this is the Saturday 5. Welcome to the Saturday 5. Baby, it's cold outside, but it's about to warm up in here as we treat you to an hour of very heated debate. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Three new faces tonight. The brilliant head of campaigns at the Taxpayers Alliance, Elliot Keck, fantastic political commentator Chloe Dobbs, and she's director of the Common Sense Society, so we might finally get some rational discussion around here. Welcome, Emma Webb. Now, with all these new faces, what you really need alongside you is a wise old head, full of sage wisdom and helpful advice. But instead, as always, I'm joined by the wokest man in Britain, Benjamin Butterworth. This could be a bumpy ride. You know the ropes by now, folks. Each host gets about 60 seconds to outline their argument about a chosen topic, then we'll all pile in, and it's like rats in a sack. It's messier than Matt Hancock's appearance at the COVID inquiry. And of course, we want to know your views as well. Get in touch by emailing gbviews@gbnews.com. But before we start tearing each other apart, it's your Saturday Night News with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Darren. Good evening. Our top stories tonight. Fresh weather warnings for snow and ice are in force until midday tomorrow for many parts of the UK. Forecasters are saying that temperatures could drop to -12 in parts of Scotland. Meanwhile, Cumbria police have declared a major incident due to heavy snow, with some vehicles stuck in traffic. Meteorologist John Hammond says the cold temperatures won't last that long.
The focus of the cold shifting northwards, something a bit milder trying to push in from the south. Then the cold air sweeps back south again, later on Monday into Tuesday. So we're not waving goodbye to this cold spell just yet. I think through the middle of the week, potentially further severe frosts. And then later on this week into next weekend, a complete transformation. It's going to turn mild, wet, windy, soggy and horrible.
A British soldier killed in Kenya was just days from finishing his tour of the country. Major Kevin McCool was off duty when he died on Wednesday. His father says he was shot while on a motorbike trip. The 32-year-old had served in Europe, the Middle East, the Falklands and Africa. Joseph McCool paid tribute to his son, describing him as special and saying that his family was incredibly proud of his achievements. An 84-year-old man who died following a huge house explosion in Edinburgh has been named locally as James Smith. The blast, which happened in the Baberton area last night, was heard from several miles away. Mr. Smith is understood to have been in a neighbouring property. A 43-year-old woman and a 54-year-old man were both taken to hospital. Police say there are no suspicious circumstances. Football fans who were charged following clashes in Birmingham on Thursday night have now been granted bail. A special court session has been taking place after violence erupted ahead of Aston Villa's match against Legia Warsaw. Almost 30 of the defendants were granted conditional bail, including a 22-year-old Polish woman who pleaded not guilty to violent disorder. West Midlands police say that 5 officers were injured after several Polish fans were told they would not be allowed into the stadium. Train drivers have been braving the cold to attend picket lines as they begin a week of industrial action over pay. Commuters across the country are facing 7 days of travel disruption. No East Midlands trains are running today, and there's a limited service between London and Scotland on LNER. ASLEF members recently voted to continue walkouts for the next 6 months. The Rail Delivery Group says they should accept an 8% pay offer, but Shadow Culture Secretary Thangam Debonair says the government needs to start negotiating.
Strikes help none of us, the working people who want to get to work, people who want to get to visit family and friends. It's really important that these strikes are settled as soon as possible, and I really hope that the government and the unions can negotiate that and a fair settlement as soon as they can.
The US says it will not permit the forced relocation of Palestinians from Gaza or the West Bank under any circumstances. Vice President Kamala Harris made the comment on the sidelines of COP28 in Dubai. She also says the US won't allow the besiegement of Gaza or any redrawing of borders.
The United States is unequivocal. International humanitarian law must be respected. Too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Frankly, the scale of civilian suffering and the images and videos coming from Gaza are devastating. As Israel pursues its military objectives in Gaza, we believe Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians.
This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now let's get back to all 5 of them.
It's Saturday night and you're with the Saturday 5. Welcome to the debating jungle, and nobody is getting out of here until we've had an hour of lively and topical discussion. Let's crack on with tonight's first debate.
Now then, Darren, what have you got for us this week?
Well, Emma, let me tell you, I'm not happy with His Majesty the King because, well, the temperature's dropping and the nights are drawing in, folks. But the BBC are keen to remind us that we're in for climate change's colder days and nights. Used to be known as winter, folks. Meanwhile, Martin Lewis, the financial guru, is sounding the alarm bells. He says, prepare to shell out more for your energy bills than ever before, as January's energy price cap, the rise of that, starts to look like something like a bad hangover after a New Year's bash. I'm reminded of the story of the late Barbara Bolton. She was 87 years old, of Greater Manchester. She was a widow and a retired pharmacy assistant. Now, folks, she was so petrified by the cost of her heating last winter that she chose to brave the cold. Now, this poor soul was whisked away by paramedics suffering from hypothermia, only to pass away in hospital. A tragic casualty of this energy crisis. Now, yet as Barbara's story, of course, tugs at our heartstrings, the climate change high priests have embarked on their annual pilgrimage, this time to Dubai for COP28. At least they'll save a penny or two on their heating costs, eh? Dubai, with its glittering skyscrapers and its oil-laden coffers, plays host to the world's glitterati, all there to solve the world's net zero goals. It's a bit like hosting an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting in a brewery, isn't it? King Charles III, our dear leader, Rishi Sunak, as well, he's there. He announced 1.6 billion quid of your money for international climate finance, but he can't find the money to help you with your energy bills. And Lord Cameron of China, they were all there. Sorry, I mean Lord Cameron of Chipping Norton, I do beg your pardon. Each of them commandeered separate private jets to grace this COP28 conference. Carbon footprint be damned. Now, King Charles III has been a bit of a prophet on climate change, hasn't he? Well, here he is back in 2009, the then Prince of Wales. He gave us a dire 96-month deadline to save the world. Well, folks, we're over 170 months later right now, and shockingly, I'm still here. It's almost as if these doomsday predictions are about as reliable as a chocolate teapot. The net zero agenda, with its climate alarmism and calls for sacrifice, seems more about stripping away power, liberty and money from folks like Barbara Bolton. It's a medley of questionable science, skewed statistics and a smorgasbord of vested interests. And let's not forget the King's sartorial blunder, sporting a Greek tie amid a diplomatic tiff over the Elgin marbles. And I say, really, Your Majesty? Such antics only serve to tarnish his image in our eyes. From, I'm going to say this, from clown prince to cop king. Now, in doing so, making speeches far beyond anything our late and great Queen ever did, King Charles risks alienating large swathes of Brits who see right through the hot air billowing from these climate conferences. I think it's high time the King realised he is now king. The hot air from Dubai isn't going to heat our homes or restock our bank balances. A foolish king would continue to be the PR poster boy for placing poverty over power. Now, Emma Webb, I'm afraid to say that I'm a staunch monarchist, but I'm very upset by the King over recent days, it has to be said.
It's very unpatriotic.
It is, I'm afraid I am. I'm upset. I'm sure I'm going to get loads of emails saying how wrong I am to challenge the King like this.
You're right, though, and I think, though, that you know, King Charles, we expected he was going to be a lot more political, actually, than he has been. He's restrained himself, I think, more than anybody expected. But the reality is that it seems that the royal family are not receiving particularly good advice, it seems, because they should know very well that whether they have advisors or not, even if they were in a bubble, it would be very difficult for them to not realise. It's sort of like Marie Antoinette being locked up away from the public, not recognising that environmentalism is not an apolitical subject anymore. And actually, it's the same with William. He needs to tread very carefully because these are highly politicised issues. And simply speaking at COP, and I think there was a previous year, maybe it was last year, he decided not to go. And he should be keeping his mitts entirely clean of all of this stuff.
Allegedly on government advice not to go.
And hopefully this isn't a sign that he's decided that actually he's not going to be as withdrawn as he has succeeded in being so far.
Benjamin, did you think the tie was a step too far? I mean, I know you agree with him on all of this climate nonsense. You'd probably quite like a trip to Dubai on this COP28.
I rather like Dubai. It's a guilty pleasure. But look, you know, who was it, tell me, that spoke at COP27 in Glasgow?
Who was it?
It was the Queen, the late Queen. And so...
And did she say all of this?
She said a lot of things.
The world is going to die, we're all going to burn.
She said a lot of things about the importance of saving the environment, and she was the keynote speaker when we hosted COP. And I was incredibly proud to see someone of that generation and that life experience leading the way on that. And I was proud when King Charles opened COP this year and the whole world sits there and listens to the head of the British state talking about the biggest issue that the world faces. You might be a little Englander who doesn't want our leaders to take leadership on the biggest issue we face, but it made me proud to be British. And the fact is that people like Barbara from Bolton weren't freezing because of the costs of climate change. They were freezing because we failed to develop our own sources of heating and light and energy, and we became reliant on warlords from other countries.
As soon as Ed Miliband introduced the Climate Change Act, we started prioritising bloody windmills.
You get more desperate every week, having to blame a Secretary of State from, what, 2008, 9, 10?
Yes, because that's when the rot started.
It's pathetic. The fact is that we have failed to secure our energy security, and that's one of the reasons why when things went awry overseas, we were vulnerable, and trying to blame that on why that woman from Manchester was too afraid to use her heating, while these companies make hundreds of millions of pounds. Often they don't pay the kind of tax that people would expect them to pay. Though you are completely wrong.
So we need more tax, Elliot, to actually buy more windmills and solar panels. And I'm sure you'll agree, looking outside right now, solar panels would work a treat, wouldn't they?
Well, I certainly disagree with that. And listen, the second you build more solar farms, more wind farms, that is energy that goes onto the international market, unless you're talking about putting up a very, very high border around the United Kingdom and stopping the energy supply from going on.
That's what he usually says.
Market, then I think that argument is for the birds. I think potentially the person you have an issue with here, though, is Rishi Sunak, who didn't allow the King to go to COP27 last year, potentially sensibly, given what we've seen this year. And I think Rishi allowed the King to go this year, and I think it's not a surprise that the King used the platform to speak his mind, although I do agree that it is troubling.
Chloe, I mean, Benjamin says that I'm a little Englander, and do you know what? I would say I'm on the side of the British people. That's what I would say to that. Whose side are you on?
I am going to be a little bit in the middle ground here.
Oh, here we are. We've got a Lib Dem on the panel.
Oh, gosh. So, climate change, it used to be a non-partisan issue. And when you saw suddenly the eco-loons sitting on the ground, gluing their hands to the floor, making this movement seem like a crazy left-wing thing, then it suddenly became something political. Now, yes, we can debate how important of an issue it is. Are we all going to die tomorrow? Yes, you're right that there have been many cases of lots of scaremongering and when we're going to die being greatly exaggerated. And those haven't come true, but that doesn't mean that climate change is not a serious issue. So, you know, how do we decide what is partisan, what is non-partisan? Just because some people sit in the road glued to the floor doesn't suddenly make it a political issue.
Just to be clear, you know, all the major parties committed to net zero in their manifestos. So there is a democratic mandate from the three biggest parties in this country, plus several others, that says that this is what Britain is committed to, and it's written in law. And you talk about the Commonwealth and being a patriot. Well, it's Commonwealth countries, islands in our Commonwealth, that are most being affected by climate change, that are seeing rising sea levels ruin their economies, ruin their ability to live. And I think the King, the head of the Commonwealth, Commonwealth has a moral responsibility and a duty to those people that don't have the voice that he has.
So will you commit then to save the Commonwealth nations by not flying ever again for the rest of your life?
Look, I always...
so.
Well, hang on. I always say that the reason this can't be solved by simply putting up people's bills and making Ryanair more expensive, it has to be solved by technology, green technology, that means that we can get in cars and we can go on planes without the damage. And Britain can lead on that because we're a highly educated economy. I know you're not one of those highly educated people.
We're also a highly taxed
knight
economy.
on shining armour.
We're also a highly taxed economy.
But we're all going to be saved by this elusive green technology. But up next, it's Elliot. Elliot, what have you got for us?
Well, Darren, touching on actually COP28 and various major international summits, between 2009 and 2021, the United Kingdom and United Kingdom taxpayers, to be specific, gave global quangos, organisations like the United Nations, the IMF, the WHO, £85 billion. Now, in 2016, we had a major national debate about who makes the laws in this country, and we chose to take back control, take back some element of our sovereignty from the European Union. But actually, sitting right next to the European Union is a massive web of international organisations that have gone well beyond the remit of when they were set up in most cases following the war. And these are organisations that are taking increasing control and exerting increasing influence over our lives, over UK policy, and are taking ever more money from taxpayers. And indeed, the United Kingdom is one of the most generous funders of most of these organisations. And I think it's time we start to look again.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can say that that's right in the political debate right now, isn't it? The whole ECHR debate and whether or not, you know, we actually need to be party to all of these international treaties, quangos and all the rest of it. I mean, how seriously do you think the Conservative Party has actually taken this research that the Taxpayers Alliance have put forward?
I don't think they're taking it seriously at all. I think they'd rather people didn't know about this. I think Conservatives have been very unwilling to admit just how badly they've lost control over the state. I think the second that the governing party says, hang on, guys, we have no ability to do anything here. We don't know what levers to pull. We don't know how to pull them, but we're giving all of your money to people that do know how to pull the levers. It's a very dangerous position for a governing party to be in. So I think they'd rather just sweep it under the carpet.
And what are the Labour Party saying on it?
Well, again, given they tend to like schmoozing with a lot of these global quangocrats, they're not saying much either.
Well, yes. Yeah, Benjamin, you quite like schmoozing with these people, don't you?
Well, I love a freebie, but, you know, it doesn't have to be from a quango. I'll take that from a lot of people. I find it very odd. You get this a lot from people that are anti-EU. You get this from people that go on about these global organisations, whether it's the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, this sort of paranoia that they're all out to get you and ruin your lives, which I think is ridiculous. But anybody knows in their normal day-to-day life that you are stronger in a team than you are being isolated, shouting at people over there. And so when you've got these global organisations where experts and governmental leaders come together and they pool ideas, they try and solve problems that you can copy and paste across different countries, pull the knowledge together, I think that is a very sensible idea. And anyone in our day-to-day lives would see that that's a rational way to lead your business.
Not how it works in practice, though.
But you also talk about the fact that we give more funding to it. Well, actually, I think Britain should be a superpower. It should be influential, that we do have good moral and ethical ideas about how the world should run. And I would rather that we use the money that we have to hold that influence. Because I tell you what, if we weren't putting money into those quangos, then
we don't hold any
leaving the door open to China and to dodgy players.
People like Benjamin.
China already control these organisations. They control them from the inside.
And you think we should back out?
Absolutely.
Well, this is actually the point, isn't it? That, you know, these organisations are sapping power away from us. You know, this imagery of our politicians pulling on levers and not being able to make any kind of difference at all.
Yeah.
You know, I think people don't understand what these organisations are. You often hear, you know, the UN this, or you hear about these international organisations, but most people don't have any understanding of actually what their political legitimacy is.
Yeah.
And actually, particularly if you're coming at this from a liberal point of view, and you're talking about political legitimacy, what political legitimacy do these organisations have? They don't. And I think that people would be very, very surprised by the findings that the TPA have pulled together, because it's a shocking amount of money.
£85 billion between 2009
That's
and
85 billion
2021.
quid, folks, of your money that's been splashed.
So you talked over the time frame. What was the time frame?
2009 to 2021.
Right, so that's quite a long time as well.
It's a shocking amount of money.
I think you,
So, I mean, regardless of the...
£85 billion between
you should
that
see
time
my
frame.
average.
We're still talking about enough for a cut to income tax every year over that period, with some change
But
left
that's a
over.
ridiculous argument because, you know, that's like those people that claimed that we lose money by being a part of the EU. Well, I tell you what, our economy has done much worse when we don't have the kind of trading setup that we did as being...
I'd like to see when we had a debate.
But we recognise that quangos are a serious issue within democracies because they hold power that isn't democratically accountable. So why would that not also be the case for international quangos that also illegitimately hold power that influences us, and also that the British public are generally not aware of because it's not something that is part of the public discussion.
And Chloe, I mean, I wonder if you've any thoughts on, you know, Benjamin speaks there glowingly about the UN, for example. I don't know about you, but when the Ayatollah, for example, is chairing some UN body and we're being lectured about human rights in Britain, I say sod off, frankly. You're talking out your bottom.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Benjamin, you've said, oh, it's great if we can all come together and come up with rules that we can copy-paste, as you said, across all different countries. We can't just have a one-size-fits-all approach to all countries. And as Emma has quite frankly pointed out, they have absolutely no legitimacy. Yes, we need to have good relationships with other countries. Yes, we have to have trade agreements and so on, but we really should minimise this international bureaucracy, which has no power whatsoever. Just as with the EU debate, a lot of people have tried to narrow it down to, oh, how much money are we saving? It's not about money, it's about legitimacy. I mean, it's completely undemocratic to give these people more and more power.
You're all sat there nodding along. You can't have it both ways. You can't say it's so powerful that it's controlling our lives and then saying it's got no power, it doesn't do anything, why do we give the money to it?
No, it has power, but it's not democratic, legitimate power. That's the point.
The truth is that we need rules in which all countries can agree to solve problems, to live in international laws, and these bodies do that. And I'd rather that than the kind of world we had 150 years ago.
All right, still to come tonight, is it time to scrap the NHS model? And how connected are the Sussexes to Omid Scobie? But up next, why did a London council try to cancel a Hanukkah installation? You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. As always, cheers very much for your emails about tonight's topics. Jessica's written in, and Jessica says, if you were King Charles, you wouldn't want to sit on a flight with Rishi Sunak and David Cameron for 7 hours either. Well, yeah, Jessica, you've got a point, but actually Rishi Sunak and David Cameron were on separate flights. Peter says, I'm not defending or necessarily supporting them, the King, the Sunak and Cameron, but the reason for separate planes will presumably be the same as for the royal family. If a plane goes down, one wouldn't want them all on the same one. Maybe correct. Right, folks, time for our next debate. Keep your emails coming in. Up next, it's Emma. Emma, tell us what's caught your eye this week.
Thanks, Darren. So, unfortunately, this is not a very upbeat story. My home turf, the London Borough of Havering, the council there has firstly made the decision to cancel their Hanukkah celebrations this year, and then under pressure did a U-turn and are now going to have the Hanukkah celebrations still. And the reason why they chose to do this in the first place was because they were concerned about community tensions. Now, Havering isn't a part of London that has a particularly large Muslim population, but they were obviously concerned that allowing Jews to celebrate one of their most important holidays was going to inflame community tensions. And we've seen the police doing a similar thing during the protests over the last couple of weeks. We saw the Met police officers tearing down hostage posters because they were also concerned about community tensions. And we've seen it in the two-tier policing. We've seen it in the police focusing their attentions on the campaign against anti-Semitism, telling them to turn off their billboard campaign that was attached to the side of vans and asking them to leave the area, rather than focusing on those who were the potential aggressors and actually policing those who were shouting, calling for jihad in our streets. So I think that this really shows how fundamentally morally bankrupt we've become, because I don't think that the London Borough of Havering did this because they had any sort of malign intent. I think that they were just resonating with this cowardly zeitgeist that immediately kowtows to any imagined, not even real, imagined concerns about offending someone, particularly the Islamic community. And we're seeing this across the board. We're seeing this also at the moment in Ireland. We saw the return of some hostages this week, including Emily Hands, who is an Irish citizen, dual Israeli-Irish citizen, and Leo Varadkar referring to her as lost and then found, rather than saying that she was taken hostage by a terrorist organisation. We have a serious problem in this country, and I think that the British public can see how morally perverse this is. I am sick of this. I know that many people who are watching this show now, The View, the viewers, will be looking at all of this and are frankly sick of it and have had enough. And frankly, I think we really need to put our foot down, because this is going to become a real problem for us if we don't do something about it now.
I assume, Benjamin Butterworth, are you going to tell Emma Webb that she's some kind of swivel-eyed bigot for thinking that this is a step too far?
On pretty much every other topic, I would, because, you know, Emma, you are. But, actually, you know, there's clearly a very good point here, which is one of the things the council said when they talked about why they weren't going to do this public celebration of Hanukkah was that they were worried about violence. And I couldn't help but think, violence from who? I don't think the Jewish people were going to go out, or the, you know, maybe Israelis that might live in that part of the world. they weren't going to go out and fight and scream and shout. We've not seen that in the last 6 or 7 weeks, have we? And it would be the people who are anti-Semites that they were worried about being violent and aggressive and expressing.
They were
criminal
concerned
levels of
about
prejudice.
offending anti-Semites.
And so the idea that you don't do an event representing a part of that community because you think the bigots might get loud and vocal is an appalling reflection on that council's judgment.
You know you've made a mistake when you and I agree with each other.
Well, but do you both agree then that actually this would not happen for any other religion, that it is actually isolated to the Jews?
Well, actually, if you look at the way that people have been responding and downplaying what has happened to Israeli citizens, particularly with the rape of Israeli women, it's like #BelieveAllWomen, except when they're Jews. They are unwilling to accept the most basic evidence put before their eyes, and it shows that this is anti-Semitism. This is the old hatred coming back to haunt us, and it is so morally perverse that people would kowtow to it. Because you're right, Benjamin, they are worried about offending anti-Semites.
And you have to think about the numbers here. Look, first of all, far from everyone on those marches for Palestine is an anti-Semite. There are plenty of reasonable people, of course there are. But for proportion, there were 300,000 people on the last march, which is more than the entire Jewish population of Britain. And that's what happens. They are so loud and so vocal that the Jewish people are not getting a chance to have their truth heard. And that's when you get councils that are pathetic enough to ban a celebration of a Jewish festival because they're intimidated.
And when you look at the Black Lives Matter protests as well, nobody is out in the streets holding up photographs of Kafir Bibas, who's the 10-month-old baby who has been murdered by Hamas, along with his 4-year-old brother and his mother. When we saw people marching in the streets saying, say his name about George Floyd, people are not doing that for Kafir, and it's because he's a Jewish baby.
Yeah, people are just so selective about what kind of violence they care about. It's almost as if people have completely forgotten and just brushed under the carpet what happened on October 7th. They're only interested in what's happening in Gaza at the moment. But, you know, going back to what the council have done, I think it's a really dangerous, slippery slope that we're going down now. If rather than punishing the people who cause violence and are anti-Semitic, we punish the Jews, we punish the people who, just because you're not liked, and you're the one provoking violence, you're the one that should be punished. I mean, that's completely insane.
I mean, Elliot, how would you feel, you know, in looking at the state of London now?
It's incredibly concerning, and I think it's a potentially inevitable result of multiculturalism, where you don't emphasise the need to cohere around a single set of values and a single idea, and instead you end up breaking off into cantons, and that always generates hate, that always generates conflict, and I think it's a big problem that has been evolving for many years.
Yeah, we've got a real problem, but I think actually finally we're starting to have a conversation about it. That's the one good thing I would say.
But also, you know, you see so many sort of indicative gestures that happen here. So, for example, you saw a university team refuse to play the Jewish Society in a sports match. A friend of mine who is Jewish, he sent me text messages of one of his relatives who's obviously also Jewish, and their business, they'd taken the business they were going to give her away because they found out she was Jewish.
Wow.
And they meant that as a reflection on what's going on in Israel and Gaza. Well, I tell you what, to all those people, it achieves nothing. First of all, that's often just racism. But if you care so much, perfectly reasonably, about the plight of the Palestinian people as well as the plight of Israelis, actions like that in Britain are not going to do anything. Netanyahu or any of the leaders of Hamas are not sat there thinking, oh, I can't believe Janet in Peterborough did that. They don't care about you. They don't even care about their own people in the case of Hamas.
It's a good point, and I don't say that often, but folks, still ahead. Should we make like Nigel? Should we head to Australia, and should we nick their healthcare system? And how involved are the Sussexes with this Omid Scobie chap? You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you 3.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. As always, thank you very much for all of your emails. Jane's written in, and Jane says, I'm so glad you've highlighted this, Emma. Praise indeed. Havering Council should be reprimanded for cancelling this in the first place. Eloise has written in, and Eloise says, it's worth noting the amazing response from the Muslim Association, who described it as offensive to our Jewish brothers and sisters and offered to help steward events for Hanukkah, providing extra security if needed. Interesting. Now, it's time for our next debate. Up next, it's Chloe making her debut. Chloe, what's been on your mind this week?
Well, I'm pretty fed up of the NHS. It is time to scrap the traditional NHS model. It's so bad that even Labour are finally realising that it needs to change. Until now, the NHS has seemed almost untouchable. During COVID, this became rampant. The NHS became some sort of religious cult, with everyone out clapping for their NHS heroes and every business virtue signalling with "Thank you NHS" signs in their windows. But people have had enough now, and the narrative is finally starting to change. The Brits have had enough of waiting forever just to get a GP appointment. They're fed up of seeing loved ones pass away, sadly, far too early because of NHS failings. Last winter, the average wait time for an urgent ambulance call went over 90 minutes. That is more than 5 times the target time. Absolutely unacceptable. So the model needs to change. It's not working, and Labour are finally catching on. Wes Streeting went and made a visit to Australia to try and learn some lessons from the Australian model. And why wouldn't you be interested in the model of a country where, even though they spend a smaller percentage of their GDP on healthcare than us, they have a life expectancy 8 years longer than ours? So what did the Australians get so right? Well, they have a public health insurance system called Medicare. Now, Medicare don't run any of the hospitals. They have private contracts where they bring in people who are actually better at doing the jobs. And what is the best thing about this? Not only is the free healthcare much better than the UK's, but they incentivise you to switch over to even better private insurance. Yes, that's right, they give you a tax rebate if you switch to a private provider, which makes sense. Why should you pay twice for taking more pressure off the public system? So throwing more and more money into a broken NHS system simply is not going to fix the problem. It is time for change, and if Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, is serious about listening to the Australians, we may well get the change we need under Labour. I don't care which party does it, but I want to see the NHS system scrapped.
I mean, Elliot, you've done a fair bit of research on this very issue at the Taxpayers Alliance and talking about all the whackery and wokery that we spend God knows how much on in the NHS itself, appeasing people like Benjamin instead of actually, you know, looking at patient outcomes and all the rest of it. So do you have any sense of optimism that Labour will sort of grasp the issue?
Not particularly. I think the easy solution for any government is just to hike up the stealth taxes. That's exactly what we saw under the Brown and Blair era, to hike up those stealth taxes, bring in more money and throw enough money at the NHS that you'll put a great big sticking plaster on it and it will stem the bleeding and it will stop the issues for a very short amount of time before inevitably a Conservative government comes back in and has to mop up the inevitable issues.
Yes,
just short-term thinking always, isn't it?
Gruesome and appropriate imagery.
It is. I mean, Benjamin, you must be delighted with the state of the NHS in Wales.
Look, first of all, under Labour, the approval of the NHS was much higher, the highest on record since it was founded. The waiting times were much lower.
What are they in Wales?
The outcomes were much better.
What are they in Wales?
Well, I'm sure you're going to tell us, so why don't you go
Well,
ahead?
they're higher than they are in England.
Look, the fact is that when Labour ran the NHS, it did much better.
If you throw enough money at a problem, you can temporarily solve it.
You know, that's just incredibly patronising to say that people don't want their taxes to be used on a better healthcare system. They absolutely do, and we see that constantly in Parliament.
As Chloe touched on, the Australian healthcare system is much cheaper. It's 9% of GDP compared to 11%.
But I tell you what,
we consistently have one of the most expensive systems with some of the absolute worst outcomes, comparable to really a poor Eastern European country.
And those outcomes weren't so bad 13 years ago. The fact is that we've got such a mess in the NHS. And one of the reasons we need more money in the NHS
Benjamin.
is because of a demographic change that you can't escape. We have a significantly greater proportion of the population who are pensioners who have more healthcare problems. And frankly, I'm sick of pensioners not paying for it.
Benjamin, what's coming out of your mouth sounds like something out of PMQs, where both the parties, rather than...
Pensioners did pay for the NHS, thank you very much, in paying their goddamn taxes.
The amount of taxes they paid wasn't what expected them to be a pensioner for 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, because they didn't expect you to invite half the world to come to Britain.
This is what the left used to be.
To work in the NHS. Our NHS would be on its knees without migrant labour, but I don't want to interrupt Chloe.
Yeah, look, what you're doing, looking backwards, saying, oh, it's worse under the Tories, it was a bit better under Labour, it is just typical PMQ's rhetoric. Rather than actually looking for solutions and improvements and change, you're just looking for ways to slam the other party. Let's look forward, find a solution and make it better. I want to see politicians who have got backbone and are willing to take a risk, to try something innovative and different. It's gotten so bad, we've got to try something else.
Chloe has a real important point there, Emma, which is saying that the public are fed up. The public are looking at this and thinking, we're paying all of this money. Half of my taxes essentially are going out every single month.
Completely. And also, so many of us are paying double. I actually had a private appointment earlier today and I had to pay a small fortune for it, but I'm also paying for the NHS. And there are many people who are turning to private healthcare because they don't want to wait 18 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, or however many years it takes to get a hip operation,
So as Chloe said, do you think you should get a tax rebate for that?
I think it's not a bad idea, but I think what we need is more fundamental reform, because even if Benjamin is right and it was better under Labour, it's because they were in government so long ago that it's just gradual, exponential decline. There's just kicking the can down the road. Everybody, ask anyone in the street, everyone has had an experience, whether it's themselves or with a loved one, of how absolutely awful the NHS is. It needs radical reform, and I'm no fan of Labour, I'm no fan of Wes Streeting, but the idea of going and actually setting aside this hubris that we've got the best healthcare system in the world and actually going out and looking at who's doing it better and learning from them is absolutely the right thing to do. Do I believe that a Labour government would actually be able to execute these plans? No, I don't. But I do think that they might find it easier to have the political will to execute those plans because it's not, the evil Tories want to privatise the NHS.
It was the last Labour governments, particularly the 2 or 3 Blair governments, who brought in the private sector into the NHS and made it more efficient, which I have no problem with, provided it's free at the point of use. And I don't think you should get a tax rebate for going private. I think you should fix the system as it is.
I agree that you should fix the system.
For example, I think it's absolutely fine that you use taxpayer money to use private services so that you can clear that backlog. That's what happened in 1997, and that's what Wes Streeting, who's the Shadow Health Secretary, has pledged to do again. And the only other thing I'd quickly say is I was in South Korea recently. No, I didn't walk there. I got a plane. But I paid £9. I got quite sick when I was there, or, a bit sick. And I paid £9 to see a GP in about half an hour's notice. And I couldn't help but think that there's a big space in the market for a private sector that would have those kind of prices here.
Imagine that, £9.
It doesn't have to be one or the other. It's not the case that we can just incentivise people to go private and then, completely ignore reforming the public system. I'm suggesting doing both.
Right. OK, still ahead. Omid Scobie. Is he a grifter or does he have royal connections? With the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. Right, folks, up next, it's time for Benjamin. Benjamin, what are you going to be talking about this week?
Well, I'm going to be talking about the Royals. Yeah, we almost made a whole hour on GB News without discussing them, but here we are. Now, I've often been called the wokest man in Britain, to which I say, please don't assume my gender. So, as you might imagine, I always felt a strong affinity with Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, because I think a lot of what they talk about and their social justice agenda is good for the world, and it makes me proud that they were royals. But even I have lost it with Harry and Meghan now. This week, Omid Scobie, who is their mouthpiece, released another book called Endgame, which I think is about his career. And in a mysterious twist, we found that in the Dutch version of this book, it had been translated to include two names that we won't name, which are the alleged royal racists who asked about what colour Harry and Meghan's baby might be. What a nightmare. It must be horrible for Omid Scobie with a book to sell and falling interest that the world was having a row over these two names published in the Dutch translation. Obviously, I don't believe that for a split second. You know, you don't translate it and then add in whole new sentences naming two of the most famous people on earth. The truth is that we need to stop this double Dutch. Harry and Meghan shouldn't be using their secret mouthpiece of Scobie. If they want to name the royal racists, have the guts to do it yourself. Now, Emma, are you a fan?
No, I think the man's a complete grifter. I think you're right describing...
Is that me or Omid?
Two peas in a pod. I think that, you know, you said it yourself. He's a mouthpiece. The reason why I think certain people have been named, I think, is because there is a certain agenda behind attacking those particular people without naming any names. I think the whole thing is entirely transparent, and it's actually quite pathetic. I think it's quite sad. You said, you know, it's the end game of his career, but what an unfortunate title to choose for a book, because it's also the end game for Harry and Meghan. They've got absolutely no prospects. They've completely done themselves over because they've been so self-indulgent that even the people who like them, such as yourself, are now completely sick of them. And I think, actually, Omid Scobie, as much as everybody already thought he was a grifter anyway, I actually think he's embarrassed himself.
Yeah, I mean, it is very embarrassing. He says, I don't speak Dutch, so I can't be sure what was published in the translation. Names don't magically appear. No. It's just so
but that's also...
He denies this, of course, but it just seems completely
That's so indecent. It's dropping the translator in it, isn't it?
Yeah, and she came out.
Yes, exactly.
And she said, well, I don't speak Dutch, so I don't Who knows what she said.
But she said that the names were in the draft, the English draft.
Yeah,
I hope she proves it.
She didn't come up with it.
Yeah.
I mean, how would she know? She lives in, Rotterdam or something.
It's so obvious.
The people in question she would know, surely.
It's like a child lying, right? Because it's so transparent. So maybe he's not being honest to drop the translator in it. But surely,
he also says he's not had plastic surgery. I think we can all judge that one.
If it does come out that he did lie in order to drop the translator in it, which I'm sure the translator would be able to prove, then surely that's only going to add to those flames online, suggesting that he's lying about everything else as well.
Well, yes, indeed. And actually, it throws into question how much of this book we can actually trust.
Maybe he believes that he can just sell more books, the more outrage, the more...
Well, maybe it's a case of all press is good press.
The way things are going in this country, we're going to need to start burning books to keep ourselves warm. So there's one.
But, you know, the King has suggested in the papers this week that they might break that rule the Queen had, the late Queen, for so long, and they might actually sue. They might bring a defamation case. Now, that's public money. Do you think that would be justified?
Well, it's the money that the monarchy raises, and then the way that it works is the monarchy then provides that funding to the United Kingdom Treasury, which then gives back a certain portion.
But do you think that would be all right?
Monarchy,
do you think they should start suing for these kind of things, or where do you draw the line?
I think it's not for me to judge whether or not they should or shouldn't sue. I think the issue with suing is it does suggest... if they sue, it does suggest that they think that the allegation, i.e. that discussing the child's skin colour and the way the child will look, is inherently a bad thing to do, and I think that would probably be misjudged.
I think if Harry and Meghan know that the royals are not allowed to take legal action on any grounds, I mean, that just, it's just like an open goal for them. They can just use the royals as a punch bag.
Well,
if they can't take, which they have, evidently. Of course they need to have the power to take legal action. That doesn't need to be on anything, but in severe cases where, clearly they've just been abused and abused and abused over and over.
It's also
They have to have some
taxpayers' money,
power.
not public money.
Well,
just to call
indeed, yeah, there's no
Benjamin
such
up on
thing
that.
as public money. But actually, I would argue that they need to just let these people be as irrelevant as they are.
Completely.
Just leave them
Just
be.
go with her late Majesty.
Yeah, I don't think anyone takes them seriously
That's why
anymore.
Omid Scobie's shilling. Anyway, thanks to our guests tonight.
Shilling
Next
is
up,
lawyers.
It's the brilliant Leo Curse with the Saturday Night Showdown. Cheers for watching. We'll see you again next week. Now, though, it's your weather with Ellie.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather. I'm Ellie Glazier. It was a very cold and frosty start for many of us this morning, and there's been quite a few wintry showers across western coasts. These are brought about by some occlusion features across parts of western Scotland, northwest England, into Wales and southwest England too. Quite a bit of snowfall across parts of northwest England with an amber snow warning in place. Some roads becoming impassable this afternoon, but that snow will gradually start to ease into this evening. Elsewhere though, further south, those showers continue to push in from the west, turning to snow across parts of Wales and the Pennines as well, where we could see up to 10 centimetres through Sunday morning. Another chilly night across the UK, but perhaps just a touch milder across the very far south. So a milder start across the south, but a much cloudier and showery picture too. Showers continue to push in from the west, and with those cold temperatures perhaps bringing some icy stretches through Sunday morning. For Scotland though, it'll be a much drier and brighter day. Plenty of sunshine and blue sky around into the afternoon, but still feeling cool and cold despite that sunshine, -1 in some places. Further south, a milder picture, but a little bit windier too, with winds coming up from the southwest. Monday starts a wet picture for many, with hill snow across parts of Wales into the south of the Pennines as well, but that will eventually clear its way south and eastwards as we go through the day on Monday. Further north across Scotland, northern England, a drier picture, plenty of sunshine around, but that rain and cloud slowly clearing its way south and eastwards through Monday, leaving a drier and brighter but colder day for many on Tuesday and Wednesday.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure. So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet?
What is this?
It's my new
It's your new t-shirt.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Great news! I've made it to a second episode. It's freezing outside. I can't feel my extremities. To be honest, the judge said if I did, it would breach my court order. So get yourself settled down with a cup of mulled wine and let's watch the Saturday Night Showdown. Hi there. Coming up in the Saturday Night Showdown as the COP28 Festival of Hypocrisy gets underway in Dubai. Are you sick of being told to reduce your carbon footprint by people with private jets? And face masks are officially deemed useless, and Michael Gove admits that COVID is man-made. Which conspiracy theory will fall next? Is the moon hollow? And should it be illegal to discriminate against fat people? And if so, should we arrest gravity? Discussing all this and much more, my brilliant panel, Susie Kennedy, Justin Panks and Lewis Schaefer.